Hey, what's going on, everybody? Back with another exciting chess video. Haven't made a video in a while, but this game caught my attention as I was studying, and I wanted to share with you. Here's a game from the Madrid Magistral tournament that took place in 1998 between Alexander Beliavsky with the white pieces and Alexander Yermolinsky with the black pieces. Just a quick background: Beliavsky is one of the very talented GMs from the 1970s. He was world junior champion 1973, won the Soviet chess championship 4 times: 1974, 80, 87, and 1990. All right, qualified for the candidates tournament in the 82 to 84 cycle. Came very close to challenging Anatoly Karpov for the world championship, but he lost in the semifinals candidate match to none other than Garry Kasparov. All right, so wanted to give the flowers to Alexander Beliavsky. He was definitely one of those super elite GMs back in the day, and he actually peaked 1997 with a 27-10 rating, which is very strong back in the 1990s. I mean, it's still strong today, but that was definitely considered elite at that time. And a quick word about A.Yermolinsky with the black pieces. Again, one of the former Soviet GMs who emigrated the U.S. In the 90s. He came over in 1991, and he was an international master at the time, but became grandmaster in 92. Not as famous as Beliavsky, so maybe he'd be considered, like a second tier grandmaster. We wouldn't put him at the super grandmaster level, right? As he was never in contention for a title or in the top 10 in the world or anything like that, but nevertheless a strong grand master. And some of his accolades is that he was 2-time U.S. champion, and he actually won the World Open in Philadelphia on 3 different occasions. So with that in mind, let's get into the game. Just real quick, just about the tournament, you can see the standings of the tournament. It had some strong players. It was, I believe, a 10-player round robin tournament, and it was won by Vishy Anand, who had a great year that year in 1998. Vishy Anand was definitely at the height of his powers by this time, right? 1995, he had challenged Garry Kasparov for the World Chess Championship, but he was very young, right, at the time. And I believe during this time he really started coming into his peak form, right, about 98, 99, 2000. So he won this tournament without a loss. And you can see some of the other notable grandmasters at the time. Peter Svidler came in second. Leko, right, Krasenkov, Adams, Carrillo, Miguel Alescas, right, for the old school fans out there. And you see Yermolinsky and Beliavsky and Julio Granda Zuniga. Okay, so thank you for being patient. Let's get to it. So the game started out D4 from Beliavsky, D5, C4, knight C6, Chigorin's defense. Exchange variation: C takes D5, Queen takes D5, E3, and of course White just wants to play knight C3, knock the Black Queen out of the center. So Black plays against this and attacks with E5 right away. Knight C3, Bishop B4. I just want to say I'm not going into any opening details here about the Chigorins. There's plenty of videos. I do have videos on my channel about it. Look up Chigorin defense according to Alexander Morozevich. And I go into great details about, going to the opening, different variations and such. So bishop d2 is played here. Bishop takes c3. B takes c3, which is most common. So we can see white has this formidable pawn center, beautiful pawn chain. All right, and what he wants to do is just simply now use those pawns to gain space and demobilize the black pieces. So knight f6 is played, and now f3, which is one of the plans. c4 is, of course, another plan that can be played, but with the same idea as castle, e4, and now we see queen d6 here. Here Beliavsky played knight e2. This is a move that you don't see too often, but the plan is very interesting, and it's one of the reasons why the game caught my eye. And maybe you can implement the plan too. And also, it's a little bit off the trodden path, well-trodden path. Normally, d5 is played here. All right, but instead, knight e2 was played, and it looks funny at first because you might say, well, can't black just simply just take on a d4 twice and just win the pawn? Well, it's not so simple. So in this game, e takes d4 was played, and then here's the beginning of white's idea. Is bishop f4 hitting the queen, and now you can see the knight and queen on d1. Now in a position to protect d4 adequately, and now he can regain his pawn. All right, so with the queen under attack, what does Beliavsky do? Queen a3. So now queen is safe, and in a perfect world, he can just capture the pawn on c3. But it's white's turn, so white plays c takes d4, and he has this perfect pawn structure. So now knight b4, right? And now bishop c1 is played. Now let's discuss this position right here. Now, this is a great position for white as far as the actual structure is concerned. This is exactly what white wanted. And if you take the queens off the board, this will be a nice endgame to play for white. And this is basically what white is shooting at from the beginning, right? Is to erect this beautiful pawn structure and just simply defeat black in an endgame situation. So black wants to try to preserve the queens and the piece activity. So knight b4 is played. Bishop c1 with the idea of hopping in with d3. Checking here. This is what happens. Knight d3. King d2. Pieces come off. And then you see the first offer of a queen trade here. A.Yermolinsky rightfully rejects it and plays queen e7. Just a quick example, right? If queen takes c1, rook takes c1, which is bad, right? Giving up a tempo. C pawn, let's say c6, and then you can see white's plan is very simple. To take that rook on the c file, simply move it to b1, place the knight on f4, light square bishop on d3, and then the rook on h1, bring that to the c file with a lot of pressure. And this is simple and good plan for white after the queens will be traded. So of course that didn't happen. So back to the game. Queen e7. Now queen c3, with the idea of course bringing the rook to c1, piling up on this on the c file. Also the queen keeps an eye on the a3 square so that the black queen cannot re-enter and harass the king. Rook d8, rook c1, c6. Again, white has to be very careful with this king in the center of the board like this. All right, so this is definitely a line that you will have to like prepare and definitely take your time investigating. White's plan here is, again, besides the idea of trading queens, he has to finish the development of his kingside pieces, right? So he has to get the knight, move the knight at some point, and somehow get the bishop and the rook on the h file into the game. So this is kind of the ideas that are floating around in the position, and this is the whole game will revolve around these ideas, right? The exposed king, the pieces, finishing their development, etc. So queen c5, another queen offer. Queen trade offer. Nope, he rejects that with queen e8. Another idea is queen e6, right? That's tickling the position, so to speak. Letting white know, hey, you have weaknesses in your position also. Queen e8, same idea, avoiding the queen trade. So now king e3, very bold move. King e1 ideally would be preferable, but you're kind of resetting the position, right? Because you're putting the king back on the original starting square, and then you're still faced with the problem of getting the bishop on f1 out and the rook on h1 out. All right. So although you might not have a problem getting the bishop out, you still have to move the king again to get the rook on the h file out. So this is one of the reasons why Beliavsky played king e3. So in the event that he does get the bishop on f1 out, then the rook can also come out. Knight d7, attacking the queen. Queen goes back to a3. Knight b6. So now we have these ideas of moves like knight d5, check. Just harassing the king. So Beliavsky plays knight f4, not only to meet the idea of knight d5, but also to get the bishop off of f1, get it into the game, right? Perhaps the d3 or something like that. Knight d5 check, knight d5 check, c takes d5, and here white plays the move rook c7, right, with the idea of playing queen to e7, again trading off queens, because again, if you trade the queens off, this is a nice pleasant endgame for white, right? The king is already in the middle. It's like a ready-made endgame, right, for white. King is already in the center of the board. It's two powerful pawns in the center. So this is white's idea. Another idea is e5, but then you have f6, f4, and it could get kind of murky here. And again, right, g5, right, king in the middle. So again, these are some sample variation that you can perhaps try to explore a little further, right? But it doesn't look too safe for white, especially as a human player. Like, would you like to really play that position? So he plays rook c7 with this idea. However, black is able to take, which he does, and he should. D takes e4. Beliavsky captures, f takes e4. Now, you might say, well, why didn't he, interpose queen e7 here? Problem is here, let's right, if we were able to do that, let's throw that in there. If queen e7 here, then this queen takes, rook takes, e takes f3, g takes f3, king f8 hitting the rook. Rook goes back to c7. Rook e8 check. King f4, and then rook e7, and you can see the pawns no longer look as glorious as they did before, and this is better for black. So that's why that doesn't work after d takes e4. But of course, if white had an extra move here and he could just magically do this, he would play queen e7. Queens would come off the board, and again, that looks full of promise. But d takes e4, f takes e4 was played, and now bishop e6 is played by A.Yermolinsky. And what this does too, besides developing a piece, it protects the f7 square. Another idea, of course, is queen e6, and what this does is it keeps the b7 pawn protected. As you can see here, bishop e6. With bishop e6, the b7 pawn is not protected. All right. However, after queen e6, bishop c4. Again, remember, white is trying to get these pieces out. Check. King d3, and this works also. Right, but you would just have to have some tactical vision. And here's a nice move right here that you could play. Rook d4, king d4, check. Right, and the idea is to pick up that rook. And notice queen b6 doesn't work because the queen, the white queen would just come to c5. So queen f6, king e3, queen g5 check, and queen d8, and now you can pick up the rook. Again, just a sample line. You will pick up that rook. You can look at some other variations if you will, but you will win material. But back to the game. So bishop e6 was chosen, and I believe it's a good choice by A.Yermolinsky. Of course, if d5 here, you could just take d5 because of the pin on the king. So rook takes b7. A.Yermolinsky by A.Beliavsky, excuse me. Is very confident. He must feel like he won't be checkmated. Rook takes b7 is played. Again, now if queen e7 here, again you want to avoid that, and now you play queen a4, and you can see how it's important that the f7 square is protected. So now the queen can leave and start attacking and not worry about his own king safety. And that's the idea there. Here, bishop c4 can be met by rook d4, king d4, and rook d8 queen d8 check, winning the rook as discussed. So rook takes b7 was played. And you can see, again, still the same problems. Can't can't get those kingside pieces developed. So queen c6. So for the cost of a pawn, black is able to get the rest of his pieces in the game here. So A.Yermolinsky attacks the rook on b7, rook b5. Right, again, having to move the same piece over and over again. So bishop d7, and now there's like ideas of like discovered checks, right, with this rook here. So queen c5, offering another queen trade. A.Yermolinsky plays a great move here, in my opinion. Queen g6, again, tying the bishop down to the defense of this pawn, and since the bishop is tied up, the rook is tied up on h1. Some of you might be saying, well, why not just win the exchange with queen h6? Well, it gets kind of murky. And let's look at it. So queen h6 check, for example, queen g5. There's that queen trade. Now bishop takes, queen takes, g takes h6, and bishop b5. Now white's pieces come out, and although white is down the exchange, this does not look clear. This is definitely not a clear a walk in the park for either side. This looks it's probably drawish actually. So black rightfully should be expecting more out of the position. So he plays queen g6, keeping white tied down, anchored down positionally, while he continues to bring more pieces into the game. So rook b7. Why? Because he has to deal with the rook being attacked. So that's another tempi there that black can use. So he plays the move bishop c6, attacking the rook again and threatening queen e5. More time for white. More time for black. White cannot do what he wants to do. He's constantly under attack. So rook e7, only move to deal with both threats. And if you look at some of my other videos, sometimes I bring up the when I'm talking about attacking, I often talk about dilemmas and trilemmas. And when you threaten your opponent and you only give him like a one, say like a one move threat, well, that's just a problem. And most strong players can solve a problem, right? So if you throw out a check or a threat, one move threat, that can easily be dealt with in most situations. However, when you start getting into dilemmas and trilemmas, which means you're creating two problems, two problems, a dilemma, or three problems at one time, which is a trilemma, then it's very difficult for the opponent to be able to handle. It's too much, right? So here, as Yermolinsky improves his position, now he is starting to present dilemmas to the opponent. So now Beliavsky has to deal with two problems at one time. It gets increasingly difficult. So here the dilemma is the rook is attacked on b7 and the pawn is attacked on e4. That's a dilemma. That's a two-pronged serpent right there, two-headed serpent. All right. This right here, for instance, is just a problem. Right? It's a one piece attacking another piece. That's it. So it's easy to deal with. Rook b5. As the game went on, now we have a dilemma, and these are the type. This is what you want. Dilemmas, trilemmas. The more problems you can create in the position, the harder it is for the opponent to deal with. So the game continued. Rook e7, only move, so he's able to deal with it, but gives white more time. Checks, right? That's a one move problem, right? It's nothing. I mean, that's not a dilemma. Just check. But let's see what happens. King f3. Now, objectively better is king e2. But what does king e2 do? Blocks the pieces. Blocks the pieces in. Right? This is why I love this game. It's very instructive. Blocks the pieces in. So, he plays king f3. And as you can see with the highlights, so his pieces, he can get his pieces out. He still has the dream. He's still holding on to the dream. But this exposes him to it. Following tactic. So queen f6. Okay, so there's a problem. Problem is created. What's the problem? There's a threat on d4. It's going to lose material. Okay, fine. He solves that problem. Now, let's see what happens here. Rook d4. Did he really solve the problem? No, because it's a dilemma. And what he did was he created a problem in the form of a dilemma, right? A two-headed serpent that white could not deal with. just looking at the position, it looks like, oh, just the d4 pawn needs to be defended. That's it. However, in this position, the queen is overworked. So what happens is there's actually attack against the rook and this pawn. So what happens is after king e3, rook takes d4, queen takes d4, queen takes e7, and Yermolinsky wins more material. So finally, he gets his piece out, bishop d3. Rook d8, there's a problem. Queen is attacked. Queen c4. And queen g5. Notice that white still has to get the rook out. Right, so it took all of that and he lost material to get the bishop out. It's queen g5, again another problem. The pawn is attacked on g2, so now what? Can't bring the rook out. King f2. Queen d2 check. Problem. Bishop is under attack. Now what? Twice. Only way to defend this bishop now is to move the bishop, because you can't move the king any closer. There's no way to defend the bishop from capture. So, and excuse me, there's no way to defend the bishop from capture and deal with the check at the same time except by moving the bishop. This is a two-pronged problem, right? It's a check and, dilemma. It's a check and attacking the bishop. So he's barely holding on. Queen f4. Yermolinsky does not want to let the rook come out, so he creates another problem. He attacks the e pawn. I'm sorry, it's another dilemma, right? Because he's checking and attacking the e pawn. And you see how it works. So when you create more than one problem, it's often so difficult for the opponent that they only can solve the one problem, but the other problem is going, the other issue is going to remain, and he loses material. And so this is the second time we saw black use the same tactic. Okay, the first time was with the rook, right? Where the rook takes pawn and queen takes rook, and the queen takes rook on e7, right? The dilemma. And then we see it the second time gain the material. So here, after this situation, king goes to f1, the e1. Bishop takes e4. A.Beliavsky gives a big sigh of relief and said, hey, I'll be able to finally get my rook in the game. And guess what? Now he's giving black a problem. He's attacking the queen and f7. That looks like a dilemma, right? And then those of you who are tactically astute can see that, hey, black has to be careful for possible mating continuations. However, even though black is now faced with the dilemma, he has queen d2 at his disposal and solves both problems right away. And what happens here is after king f2, the action of the rook down the f file is blocked. So there's no longer a problem. Okay? Black solves his problem. But after bishop d3, A.Beliavsky is forced to resign because now he is faced with the dilemma which he cannot solve this time. And that's the attack against the queen on c4 and the bishop on e2. And this time he is finally run out of defenses and had to resign. So I hope you enjoyed that game. Please like and subscribe. Hit the thumbs up button. Check the links below. You can donate to the channel and support in various different ways. And also there'll be links to books and DVDs below, video resources. Again, that was Alexander Beliavsky with the white pieces and versus Alexander Yermolinsky, and very interesting line of the Chigorin defense. and I'll see you guys on the next video.